Well, the ice storm has hit, and so here we are repairing and maintaining our food processing equipment. But this week, instead of the normal, what do we do on the farm, we've often been asked over the years, how in the world did you get here, especially from where you came? Well, this week we thought we would answer that question. Danielle and I met in our church singles group down in Georgia when I was stationed there. Her father had retired at the same base that I was stationed at. Eventually, I was deployed to Kuwait, and she began to email me because she remembered when her father was over in Desert Storm. When I got back, about a year after that, we fell in love and got married.
Life was amazing. Sean worked as an experimental test pilot, flying a variety of different aircraft. I had spent many years working as a veterinary technician, majoring in animal biology and pre-vet studies, and I spent my free time riding and training horses. While he was off on military assignments, I stayed busy volunteering, teaching, riding and training clinics, and riding for a mounted patrol unit. When Sean was home, we traveled the country whenever possible, camping, horseback riding, and generally experiencing everything life had to offer. Outside of our adventures, we were a pretty normal couple. We ate fast food, we watched television, we ate out at restaurants pretty frequently because I was a lousy cook. About a year into our marriage, we were living at a new base in Southern California, and we started raising and training service dogs. We soon noticed that the service dogs, especially the puppies, would come down with these mysterious illnesses, and we'd wind up at the vet. And eventually a veterinarian determined that the puppies, the blood work was showing some type of toxin, but he couldn't identify what it was. But he felt like it was something in our home or environment. About the same time, I wound up pregnant with my firstborn. And we had no idea how much life was about to change. And not just because we were going to have a baby. When I was only 27 weeks pregnant, I went into preterm labor. I wound up on strict bed rest, eventually being moved to the hospital's perinatal unit for the final week of my short pregnancy. And then an emergency resulted in our son, JR, being delivered by C-section at 36 weeks gestation.
After our son was born, we quickly realized something was wrong. Sean ate all day long, but he vomited about 30 to 40 times a day. He was failure to thrive. He screamed incessantly. We saw all sorts of specialists, and we were at UCLA Medical Center, so it wasn't like we didn't have a good medical team. They were absolutely baffled. We got referred to a neurologist, but at the same time, because of the dog issues and the issues that Danielle had, I thought, what do they all have in common? And the one thing I came up with was water. So we changed to bottled water, and in 3 days, Sean was miraculously healed. Now, we went to the base and we wanted to make sure that the water was tested, and it was, but the EPA only tests for about 9 elements. But there's about 152 elements in water that'll make you sick. So essentially the water was cleared as safe, but it was clearly causing severe reaction amongst my family members and the dogs. After that point, Sean had a severe allergic reaction to amoxicillin. And I remember being at the doctor's office, and he said, no meat or dairy for 2 weeks. And I didn't understand why. And he said, well, all meat and dairy in the store could have residual antibiotics left over. I didn't really understand that because I was told that that couldn't happen. And he said, you can go to this particular store. Well, it was one of those stores that sells the organic, free-range. I just thought that was a hippie craze. And that, only rich people shop there if they're celebrities or whatnot. But I went in there and really my eyes were open because he said that's the only food that you can guarantee will be safe for your child.
I suffered a miscarriage in 2005. Then, shortly after that, we purchased a home in Illinois that we decided was going to be our retirement home once Sean retired from the Air Force. He was from Illinois originally, so it made sense to come back to his roots. Then in 2006, I became pregnant again with our daughter. Everything was okay at first, and I was extremely careful about the water. I only drank the bottled water that we purchased. But again, unfortunately, beginning at 24 weeks, I went into preterm labor. This time we were a little more prepared for it, and I was put on strict bed rest again. At 34 weeks, I began to suffer premature placental deterioration, which endangered both me and the baby. So the doctors admitted me to the hospital, where I spent the next 2 weeks, and I managed to keep the pregnancy until 36 weeks, at which time the baby was delivered via C-section. Thankfully, she was born and her trials ended there. She was a healthy baby from day one. But in my case, the doctors recommended we never try to get pregnant again. It was just too risky that there was a chance of losing me or the baby with these complications I was having. And, we were totally okay with that. We had always planned 2 or 3 kids, and at that point, we had a healthy boy, a healthy girl, and life was good. So we resigned ourselves to life as a happy family of 4. God had other plans, though. So shortly after our daughter was born, in fact, she was about 6 weeks old, we were reassigned to Florida. We moved to Florida, and not long after we arrived, I broke out in this skin rash that itched like crazy. Eventually, an allergist put me on antihistamines, and he said, we actually see this a lot, so you're going to be on these antihistamines at least as long as you're stationed in Florida, if not the rest of your life. Well, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. Because I'd never had allergies in my life. So we kind of went back to those early days with JR's allergies to the medicine and what we had learned about the organic foods and the minimally processed foods. And we decided we really needed to take some drastic changes to our life and our diet, things that we had been putting off up to that point. And amazingly, as we got more into the organics, my rash just went away. And I never needed to take another pill. So we were learning quickly at this point about just the way our food system works in the U.S. And the more we learned, the more frightening it became.
Yep. In 2008, our journey took a little bit of a turn again because we decided to adopt. And luckily, right away, we got a beautiful baby boy, Aiden. Well, he was in the NICU for a while because the doctors told us that he was potentially drug exposed during pregnancy. And he ended up with a rash, and the doctor said it was most likely detox from the drugs getting out of his system. Well, later on, he did have some neurological problems, but we decided we were going to give him the best, healthiest environment we possibly could to combat this issue. Well, the military always moves you, and we were off to Nevada this time, our family of 5 now. And then shortly thereafter, we get baby Nathan. And Nathan was a doll. He was a tiny, tiny little baby. But for all practical purposes, he was healthy, or so we thought. But about a year, we realized that he wasn't developing like the rest of our kids had. And at number 4, we knew really how a baby should develop. And turns out we took him in for some testing, and it was determined that he had cerebral palsy. He was stiff, he couldn't walk, he couldn't roll over, he had trouble eating and vomiting and things like that. So this diagnosis was shocking because what they said was he might not potty train for a long time and that he would need casting and intensive therapy to deal with these issues. He's going to be in braces probably till he's 9 or so. He may not walk until he's 4. A lot of things that just really shocked us. Another change began to take place that year. We found a local organic food producer, and we began to seek out real food, is what we called it. Food that was grown and produced the way God had intended it. And, of course, we had to learn to cook. And that was one of the challenges. We also tried to grow a garden, but we were in Las Vegas, Nevada. And that didn't work out so well. We got our first tomato, and I think a bird ate it. And then in learning to cook, I got Danielle a bread maker. And she unceremoniously destroyed that. But she had to then learn to make her own bread, and we bought that KitchenAid mixer, which she learned how to make bread from that. Also a canner. We began to can foods. We had a challenge that we were going to try to fill our pantry with foods that had no labels on it. It's simply the labels that we had written on that. And so we were basically trying to become more self-sufficient and learning how to get pure food and how to process and handle the pure foods that we could find.
You don't realize how much processed food you eat until you go on a journey to eliminate nutritional labels from the pantry. Yeah. That can be a real eye-opener.
It is a challenge. We went to the extreme. We began to grind our own wheat berries into flour, and we had a hand crank mill, which was really neat. And we also we found a raw milk producer, and we would have to travel hours to get to this and get the raw milk that we wanted. It was liquid gold for our children.
We were starting to notice major changes in our health. I am a long-time type 1 diabetic. My sugars were becoming much more stabilized, and I was just feeling better overall. JR was no longer suffering the ear infections that had been just a chronic plague pretty much since he was born. Michaela had remained healthy. Aiden, although we still had some neurological issues we were dealing with, was doing far better than any of the doctors and therapists predicted. And even little Nathan, who we had been told not to expect much for several years, was fully potty trained and walking unassisted before he was 2 years old. So clearly something in these changes was working.
Well, by the year 2010, we had been reassigned to Colorado, and we took all our knowledge with us. We quickly found a source for raw milk. We found a source for grass-fed beef and bought a beef directly from the rancher. We signed up for a CSA program, Community Supported Agriculture, and began to buy all our vegetables as much as we could from them. And we wanted to delve into producing our own, but we lived in base housing at the time. And the only animal we could have in base housing, unlimited, was something that was in a cage. And, well, it turns out you can put rabbits in a cage. So we turned our garage into a rabbitry. We didn't really let the base housing people know that, but but we did. And we produced our first homegrown meat from the rabbitry.
As happens in the military life, where you always have to be flexible, unexpecteds come along, and within a year of that move, our house that we had been assigned developed some pretty major repair issues, which were going to force us to move again. At the same time this was going on, we wound up with baby number 5. So when she was only, maybe 4 or 5 weeks old, we moved to the country. This was a bit of a whirlwind move, though, because we were taking such an interest in raising our own food. I had gone and taken a goat milking and management class. So we moved into the house on Saturday. I had prearranged goats, so I picked up 2 pregnant goats on Sunday. By Wednesday, I picked up our first little batch of chicks from the farm store. Mm-hmm. Of course, we already had the rabbits that we had gotten set up in the garage. And we had to kind of figure all this other stuff out at the same time. So a little bit of a whirlwind. I don't think I would recommend anyone do it that way. I think Sean especially was overtasked. But we were loving it. We were meeting the goals we had. Our kids were having a ball with all these animals, and we were still learning, which was thrilling, even if it was cardboard boxes and heat lamps in the garage.
Yeah.
Throughout the next few months, we settled into a routine and expanded further. We got turkeys, developed a better brooder system in the garage. Although we still used cardboard boxes, it got a little more sophisticated. We built a nice rabbitry setup and a chicken coop. We made some repairs to the original goat shed and pen that were on the property, and then fenced in a new area for pasture. We bought our first chest freezer, and we learned how to harvest poultry. In fact, our first turkey resulted in a bird that was nearly too big for the bag that we had. Soon after, our goats freshened, and I had to quickly learn how to raise goat kids, disbud, and castrate. We purchased a few more does and a buck, which we regretfully brought home in our minivan because we had no truck or trailer. I think it took several months to get his scent to wear off those fabrics. Then in 2012, we had expanded enough we needed some livestock protection from the fox, coyote, and bear that tended to frequent our area. Someone donated a donkey to us, but we quickly realized we needed more protection than she could offer, so we purchased a livestock guardian puppy. We then turned the donkey into a pet for the children and a therapeutic option, which further helped Aiden and Nathan with their muscle development. We started beekeeping, gardening, we learned how to compost. Our donkey wound up being in foal, and we soon found ourselves with 2 donkeys. We bought a cheese press, learned to make hard cheeses, and I even tried my hand at soap making using the goat's milk. We really started feeling like true homesteaders at this point. And word started to spread about the natural and the humane methods we were using to raise these foods. People literally began begging to purchase what we were raising. We also began getting frequent requests from people to take their surplus roosters and culled goats and such for butchering. Then in the winter of 2012, a huge blizzard hit Colorado. We were completely snowed in and isolated for 3 days before a plow was able to dig us out. That was the first moment we realized how nice it was to possess the skills and the self-sufficient livelihood that we had been developing over the last few years.
Well, the next experience really tested my skills and my confidence altogether. My neighbor had loaded his bull into the trailer to take it to the butcher, and it escaped. Well, it got out on the highway, and it was a dangerous situation, so we had to put the bull down. But as it lied there, I thought the ground is too frozen to bury it, and I wasn't going to let all that meat go to waste anyway. So I told my neighbor, we're going to butcher this bull. The bull butchering experience was just that. Danielle and I, as part of this whole transition, we began to read voraciously. We would read every book we could get our hands on. And as some of you know, when you read a book and you look at the pictures, it looks so easy. And well, what I did was I had this book on butchering, and I photocopied the pages that show you how to cut it up, and I hung them up in this garage. And I would look at the pictures, and we would literally look at the picture and read the text and then go through that piece. And it was quite interesting. We did a pretty good job, and some stuff we kind of messed up. But, you know, that was the beauty of it all. We realized you can do anything that you put your mind to. And yeah, you can read it in a book, but you know what? Sometimes you just got to get down and dirty and do it. And by 2013, retirement was quickly approaching, and we had made the decision that our property back in Illinois was going to be used as a place to produce food, to have a nice permaculture farm, and establish what we had started in Colorado. But one key part of that was the fact that Danielle had some incredible experience and knowledge and training in horsemanship. But she did not have any experience in driving horses. So we went about the task of learning how to drive horses. And that was really fun. We did that together.
Took a couple of clinics.
Yeah.
Then in early 2014, Sean actually retired. We celebrated his official retirement ceremony, and it was really pretty ironic because here's a guy who is going from some of the latest and greatest high, big-time technology in the Air Force as an experimental test pilot. He was a mechanical engineer. He was an instructor at the Air Force Academy, and he was going to become a draft horse-powered farmer. So we celebrated that by surprising him at his retirement ceremony with a cake that was, we had a custom baker create this chocolate raspberry filled, so you can imagine it was a little gooey when you sliced into it, perfectly formed red wattle pig. It was beautiful. And everybody
That's
got
part of the retirement,
a kick out of that.
Yeah.
That was fun.
So luckily we sold our Colorado home pretty quickly, and we had the assets to transition to our Illinois farm. And remember, the trailer was packed with 31 different animals and 50,000 bees in the truck as we traveled across the U.S. and you got stuck in Kansas. That's a different story. Anyway, but we had a lot more confidence, and we had a lot of cash flow at that time, and we really went about it and set it up with the chickens and the turkeys and the goats, and we got the red wattle pigs, and we got beef cattle, and we had, of course, the bees, livestock guardian dogs, which were working really well. And so we were really on our way. And as far as the horses are concerned, we had bought, sight unseen, a team of Belgians from a trusted driver and teamster over in Indiana, and we were able to go over to Indiana and spend several days on the farm working with these horses and different implements, learning exactly how to work with them. And boy, that was a great team and a great step forward for both of us. By the summer of 2014, we were living the American dream, or at least our American dream. We had 5 kids. We had a horse-powered farm. We were basically living everything that we had learned over the years. And then tragedy struck.
In July of 2014, Just about 6 months after we got the farm going, one of our new horses had a totally freak accident while grazing out in the pasture. It nearly destroyed his leg, but thanks to a very knowledgeable vet who acted quickly and a charitable family member who had the time and resources to really spend time rehabbing this horse, we were able to basically send him off to rehab and just try to get better for a year or so. Meanwhile, I was trying to learn how to run the farm with a single horse. We tried to make do for a month or so, but we quickly realized that much of our work demanded a team of strong horses. So we went on the search. We found another gelding who seemed to be a good match, but he'd been trained to pull hard and he wasn't good at stopping. I began working with him every day, just driving and practicing and working, really trying to break some of his bad habits and improve his concept of teamwork, which he didn't seem very familiar with. A few weeks after he started to improve, Sean and I made a bad judgment call. We were hitching to a piece of equipment that we needed to move, and the horse's old habits kicked in. He pulled too hard, too fast, and the piece of equipment flipped over on Sean. Sean got caught and dragged about 30 feet across the gravel. That was the worst moment of my life. I had to make a decision in that moment to get the horses under control and safely tied up, or let them go so that I could go tend to my husband, who was literally laying in a heap, unmoving on the driveway. Meanwhile, all my children are standing around. They've just witnessed this whole incident occur, and the look of shock and just, they were mortified. Terrible moment. But thankfully, I did get the horses under control. I got them safely tied up. I was able to tend to Sean, who did, praise God, he was okay. But he did require a trip to the trauma center. He wound up having some permanent nerve damage in one of his feet from his leg being crushed, and he had several broken bones in his face, but ultimately he was okay. We did learn an important lesson from that event, though, and to date, everything we do on our farm, we try to make safety a priority now. Whether we're working with horses or just around the farm in general, we always try to consider doing everything in the safest manner possible.
Well, by the grace of God, I survived that ordeal. And over the next 5 years or so, we really settled into the farm life. We had a successful direct-to-consumer food sales business, a CSA produce program, somewhat mirrored like the one we did in Colorado, an expanding horse-drawn wagon business, provided a variety of tours, clinics, they were very popular, educational events to help others see the natural, sustainable foods and good health was possible. We developed an internship program. We partnered with organizations like Wolf and Hip Camp to encourage people to get outside and learn. As the years went by, the farm and the foods we raised morphed a bit. After increasing to 6 horses at one point, we downsized to a much smaller team and eventually to a trio of smaller drafts that proved more versatile to meet our needs.
Then in 2018, another unexpected blessing occurred. We got a phone call asking us to adopt a baby in a remote village in western Alaska. Within 36 hours, I was boarding a plane with a one-way ticket. So the next month became a whirlwind adventure like nothing we had ever experienced before. By Christmas, though, I had returned from Alaska and Kyla was well integrated into the family.
Then in 2019, we felt that God was giving us a sign that we were definitely on the right path with our diet and our lifestyle changes. Nathan went in for another MRI, and 10 years earlier, it showed damage on the top portion of his brain that affected motor skills. This MRI showed absolutely nothing. It was a miracle. Doctors couldn't explain it, but we sure were thankful. Then came the spring of 2020. Well, I don't need to say what happened there. But in our personal family, it was also pretty tragic here. Besides just COVID, my brother tragically died. My mother was diagnosed with cancer. My uncle passed away. And Danielle was also suffering from some medical issues too. We really lost almost all our business in the blink of an eye. We couldn't do our CSA program. All of our horse-drawn carriage work was canceled indefinitely. And
our suppliers for the poultry.
yeah, the suppliers for
didn't
the
come
poultry
through.
didn't come through. We couldn't get our poultry. It came to a screeching halt.
But it gave us that moment we needed to just get refocused, to really sit down as a family and talk about where we were headed and where our passions were in life, and like he said, what our kind of goals for the future were. So we were able to use that opportunity. I wanted to get back into training, and so we were able to set up to bring the Mustangs back, and I could start training again. And we decided it was time to reprioritize the canning and preserving and growing food for our growing family. I mean, at this point, they were eating about as much as we could produce. Between 3 boys and 3 girls, all of whom work hard and eat more.
And that's where this YouTube channel came from. We decided, hey, we're going to continue to educate. We're going to continue to encourage people. And this is the best way to do it. So like everyone else in this politically confusing COVID era, we don't know what the future holds. But we personally know that over the years, God has directed us, guided us, encouraged us, and sometimes steered us in different directions through tragedy and through triumph into where we are today. And we have seen miraculous healing from diet and lifestyle change within our own family. But even more encouraging is the other people, our customers, have come to us and said, oh my goodness, this has changed my life. Or people that have come and taken a clinic and said, I never thought I could do this. Or people that just walk on the farm and say, I have never seen this in action. And so here we are. We hope we can encourage and motivate all of you the same way.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's content.
If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And if you have, tell a friend, hit the like button, and leave a comment. We really like those comments.
Otherwise, we'll see you back next time here at A Different Way.
Cheers.